Hi, this is Megan with Beadaholique, and today I'm going to show you how to use shrink plastic in jewelry making. And the shrink plastic that we are carrying is by Inkssentials, and it is from Ranger, and it looks like this. And in your package, which clearly I've already used some, yours won't look like this when you open it, you're gonna get 5 sheets of clear shrink plastic. There are several different types of shrink plastic. This is the type we're carrying right now, so all of what I'm going to tell you is going to refer to this type of shrink plastic, because there are also some frosted ones and different versions. So I'm going to kind of just do an overview of some of the ways that you can use clear shrink plastic. And I'll show you a couple of projects that I've made. I made this pendant, and this pendant's actually been designed on 2 sides. So I used colored pencils on the back side and rubber stamps on the front side. It can give you kind of a dimensional look if you do both sides of the clear shrink plastic like that. And then I have these fun little earrings, and these I just used a permanent marker on. So you can kind of do whatever you want with shrink plastic. It's kind of only limited by your imagination. So I'm not going to do one specific project. I'm just going to kind of give you an overview of different techniques that you can use on the shrink plastic. So one of the main things is going to be what you use to color your shrink plastic, what you use to make your design. So you can, on regular shrink plastic that hasn't had anything done to it, you can use permanent markers. So you can use different colors of permanent marker. I'm just going to put this white paper down so you can see better on the white background. And the permanent marker, as you go across, will give you a little bit of a texture, but it won't show up all that much. The one thing to keep in mind, I guess 2 things. There's 2 things to keep in mind when you're designing your colors and shapes and layouts for shrink plastic, is that 1, your design is going to shrink. It's going to end up being anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 the size. And the other thing is that your colors are going to get darker and more saturated. So I can give you an example of both of those things with this leftover piece here. And on this leftover piece here, you can see these heart shapes are the heart shapes that I used in these earrings. So you can see that the color got dark and intense, and how much smaller they are also. So you are going to need to plan accordingly. You're going to need to make your piece much larger, and also you want to use a lighter shade. It's going to get a lot more intense, the color. So one thing you can do is use just a little piece of your shrink plastic and go ahead and bake it and make a swatch, a sample, so you can see what the color and the size is going to do. Another thing about when it shrinks is that you're going to want to make sure that you're placing your designs straight along the grain of the plastic. They've basically taken plastic and stretched it 2 ways, and then when you heat it up, it condenses back into its original size. So you don't want to cut a square crooked, because then it's not going to remain nice and square when it bakes. So you'd want to go ahead and use the straight edge of the plastic and make sure your shapes are straight on the grain of the plastic when you're planning that out. And also, if you're going to have shapes where you have more than one and you want them to be uniform, you'll line them up all the same way, all facing up and down the same way. Go back to different ways you can color. Like I said, you can use permanent marker. You can also use a permanent ink pad. We carry several colors of the StazOn ink, and in this project here, I've just taken the StazOn ink on the ink pad and just made different little stampings and kind of made a little random pattern. And again, you can see I used this intense purple color, but by the time I baked it, it's almost black. So again, it's gonna get darker. And the fun thing with the rubber stamping is it almost gives a little bit of a raised texture to it. And if you're gonna go for that look, you can actually also use acrylic paint, and that will give a kind of raised up bubbled surface. So that can be a fun way to go if you want a really intense opaque color. Okay. One of the other more common ways to color shrink plastic is with colored pencils. You're actually going to need to rough up your plastic. So you'll use a fine grit sandpaper, and along the grain of the plastic, you're just going to sand side to side. And then you're going to go completely perpendicular to what you just did and go up and down. So you're going to do a cross-hatch pattern like that, and the end result should be a frosted kind of a look to your shrink plastic. And then you can just take regular colored pencils, and with that texture on there, they will now stick to the shrink plastic. And you're going to want to wipe away any little bits of the colored pencil lead, otherwise you won't have a nice smooth even surface. And again, don't forget, these colors are going to intensify a lot when you bake the plastic. So they're a good way to color because you'll get like a nice soft color, and then it will get brighter when it bakes. So as far as the designs that you do, if you want to do designs with a rubber stamp, that's really easy. Also the great thing about the clear plastic is that you can trace. So you can take the plastic and put it right down over some kind of design that you want to trace. I took my initial M and I just, on a word processing program, made it really big and printed it out. And now I could go in and just trace that. And color it in. And again, you're going to want to make it nice and big because it's going to get a lot smaller. So you can go and just use the transparency as a tool. You can just color that in. And again, you can also do layering. So you could take a color pencil or permanent marker background on one side, and then you could use a rubber stamp or a different marker on the front side, and it will give you an interesting kind of three-dimensional layered look. Now, to cut out your design, there are several ways that you can cut shrink plastic. You can of course use craft scissors. You can also use a craft knife like an X-Acto blade. If you're going to be cutting out designs from the middle, that's a good way to do it. Another really handy thing is that you can actually use paper punches. So with these earrings and the cute little hearts, I just use a heart-shaped paper punch that we carry at Beadaholique. We also have some squares and circles. The important thing is to make sure you have a large enough punch because they do shrink down so much. So if you're going to do something small like this, you can definitely use this size punch. If you want to do something larger, like this pendant here, I actually just measured a square out of the corner with a ruler, and my square, I'm not kidding, was about that big. So just like I said, you can do a swatch and see how the sizes are going to change. It is about a half to a third the size of the original. So you can also get really big jumbo punches if you want to use that. The other handy part about using punches is that you can get a 1/8 or to 1/4 inch round hole punch and use that for making the holes for hanging your piece. So I've used that here to make the hole for my jump ring, and I have an 1/8 inch punch, and it's just about perfect for fitting a standard jump ring through. So once you have your piece ready to go and cut out, there are instructions on the back of the shrink plastic for baking. And I just want to give one note is that I have a dedicated toaster oven that I use for polymer clay and shrink plastic. You can use this They tell you you can use this on your regular oven. If you're gonna use a lot though, it's best to get a dedicated oven for it, like just a toaster oven. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It doesn't need to be convection, just the most basic toaster oven works really well. And you're gonna put it in the oven between 300 and 350 degrees. And they just tell you for several minutes. And what's gonna happen when you take your piece of shrink plastic and you put it in the oven. First of all, I highly recommend putting it on a piece of parchment or a silicone baking mat or something like that. And you're gonna wanna use something that you're not gonna use for food, but you want it to be on a non-stick surface. And you'll put in your piece of plastic ready to go on your parchment paper into the oven or toaster oven. And then you're gonna wanna watch it as it bakes, because it's going to curl up into itself and then flatten back down. And as it flattens back down, you'll notice that it got a lot thicker and a lot smaller. And basically you wanna watch it get all the way curled up and all the way flat again. And then once it's all the way flat again, then you're ready to take it out of the oven. So don't be scared if it curls up. It almost always flattens out if you're doing a particularly long or large piece. It might get kind of stuck, and all you wanna do is very carefully pull it out of the oven and kind of help it apart. And be super careful, doing anything like that when it's hot. But you can also lay a piece of parchment paper on top, will help it from sticking to itself when it curls up. You just need to be able to see what's going on so that you can see when it flattens back out. Usually only takes a few minutes for the whole process also. So now that you have your pieces of shrunk plastic out of the oven, you can see on both of these that they're shiny, and they don't necessarily come out both sides shiny. It depends on how you treated it when you did the coloring. You can see this one is matte on the back, and that's because I sanded the back so they use the colored pencil on it. The front side, if you've left it alone, will most likely still be shiny, but as you can see on this pair of earrings, I have both sides shiny. All I did to this was I used diamond glaze one side at a time and made sure I tried not to get it into the hole. And I just put it on a thin coat, let it dry, flipped it over and put it on the other side. On this piece, before I coated it, I just sanded the edges gently, and I just took the piece, and you can see they almost look like pencil lines. That's just from me running the edge along the sandpaper, because I cut out a straight square with sharp corners, and I didn't want it to be too sharp. So all I did was just sand the edges down. And if you have sharp corners, it's a good idea to go ahead and sand them just gently with fine grit sandpaper. And then I also put diamond glaze on the top of this one to give it a shiny front. You can also put resin on the top if you want a really nice high gloss domed surface. That'll make the piece look really pretty and finished. You could also use like a spray sealant on there. You're gonna wanna seal it with something for the most part, just to keep your color and whatever you used for the design a little bit more permanent. And it's important also to note that you really don't wanna get these wet even after you do seal them. So don't wear them in the shower or the swimming pool. But as long as you seal them up, they should be relatively fast, and they're pretty durable too. It gets really thick. So you can do a lot of other techniques, such as bending the plastic right when it comes out of the toaster oven. You do need to be really careful with that because it is hot. That's a little bit more of an advanced technique, and for now I'm just giving you a basic overview, but you can see that the possibilities are kind of endless, and there's also many other things that I'm not including here. So don't feel like you can't experiment and try other things, or if you see something different somewhere else, you can definitely do this other ways. I'm just kind of giving you some of the most common techniques used. And that is an overview of shrink plastic and jewelry making.